Welcome back to the Product-Led Growth Podcast. I'm your host, doing my best William Shatner impression, Justin Michael. We're talking about product-led growth for sales development reps. It's a whole lot of acronyms, PLG for SDR, the hashtag. We have the co-founder of Reprise, Joe Caprio, on the show, and really excited to talk about his company, his product market fit, his journey, and how that wraps into sales and PLG. How are you today, Joe?
I'm so good, man. Thank you for having me. I'm super pumped to be here, Justin.
Thanks so much. So to kick these off, it's literally such a new term that I love to say, what is the definition of product-led growth? And I get a different answer every call. So it's actually good. It's educating us.
Yeah, this is an interesting topic for me too, because our product that we're taking to market enables legacy SaaS company to become product-led, which is the advice that every VC and every advisor is giving their portfolio now. Get lean, remove friction, enable the customers to progress themselves through the sales motion and get more product-led. And a lot of folks will hear that. And from a sales point of view, I'm a career sales leader, will say, what does that mean? Free trials, freemiums? Like, is that what that means? Be product-led is give it up for free and then expand the deal after. And it kind of really artificially gets summarized as free trials on the website are product-led. But the reality is it's actually what I said. It's about becoming more efficient by removing the burden for your buyer to get through the motion on their own. And so, yes, free trials and freemium, like those are examples of being product-led, but it's anywhere you ungate access to your technology, whether it's doing a demo on the first call instead of on the second call, or sending out, clickable sandboxes as your prospecting attempt instead of links to an ebook as a prospecting attempt. It's anywhere that you lead with product because you've realized that the product is the strength of any venture-backed SaaS company. You spend millions of dollars building your product, and then you create some hack marketing or sales asset, which is inferior to the product itself. So product-led is putting your product first because it's what your customers want.
Such an exciting time. So one book says the product sells itself. And I think there is some truth to that. Take us through the myth. Can it fully sell itself? Do we still need the SDRs? I mean, everyone's been talking about how the SDR is going to go away. But what really happened is Mark Andreessen was right. Software ate the world. Everybody became a SaaS. The funding rounds went crazy. And what we do is we need more and better SDRs. And I think we need them for PLG companies too. But can you take us through, how do we do it? Advise us.
Yeah, I think that there's an absolute movement in the way that buyers are buying technology, even enterprise B2B technology. And so I think about two things that happened during COVID. My mom started using Uber. She downloaded Uber on her phone and she checked to see if there were cars nearby, and there were. And so she stopped using taxis. And my aunt decided not to use Airbnb. She downloaded and installed Airbnb on her phone and decided she liked hotels better than other people's apartments. And so these are laggards, right? These are not early adopters. These are laggards when it comes to technology, yet they're getting accustomed to installing an application on their device, testing it, and then deciding if they want to move forward with the vendor or not. These are laggards on the adoption model. Think about the leaders, right? Think about the early adopters. They grew up on iPhones, okay? And so the folks that are now buying technology are being accustomed to buying technology the way B2C technology is sold. So they get to your website and they don't care that it's six figures and they don't care that it's very complicated. They just want to touch it and they want to click it. And so as a result of that, smart vendors are adopting product-led motions because it's in line with the buyer's desires. That then changes the rest of your sales motion. And so as an XDR, like I've never been afraid of being replaced, either by an immigrant or a robot, right? Progress is good and you shouldn't cling to your current role. The world's going to change. The people are going to adapt, and then you have to rise to the top of the new market. And so if your company can get away with a touchless sales motion, they're going to do it, and you should let them do it. Go find a job that needs a salesperson. Or what's really happening is we're in a world of transition right now. You don't flip a switch and all of a sudden you're a freemium software, right? So as you're becoming product-led, your buyer's needs change. Maybe they no longer need you to do the demo, but they need you to help them set it up. Maybe they no longer need you to do a revival campaign. They need you to do a cart abandonment campaign. And so your engagement changes as your customers' needs change. But I don't think we're at a world where we're totally outsourcing every human being with a robot or with technology.
It totally makes sense. What are some of the things? So there's two things. One, this stuff gets really hot. And it's we're all going to do PLG. When should you not do it? just because you're SaaS, I mean, someone on the show said maybe 40% of SaaS companies in the next 5 years could go PLG. When do you not do it? And what are some of the pitfalls? Like, give us like the Surgeon General's warning, because there's hysteria in Silicon Valley. It's like, oh, we're PLG now, and
Yeah.
we raise money and they'll just be file sharing and people freak out. They all do it. It's this big ruckus. And it's what I love about what you said earlier, I hope I can share, is you went through hundreds of iterations to find your product market fit. You maybe share with the audience a little bit more about Reprise and how you chose to make it PLG, and then how that went into a sales motion.
Yeah, so I've been B2B revenue SaaS for 15 years now. I was at Insight Squared, I was at Chorus, So like my network is really good for meeting with, CRO, CMO, head of RevOps, head of enablement at venture-backed SaaS companies. So I went outbound in my network and I went down my first degree connections and I did product market fit interviews. And then as I started to get my feet under me, I started to pick up on these trends. I went outbound to strangers and I said, I'm seeing these things in the market. We're building a solution for it. Can I ask your feedback on it? And I went out, I did 700 meetings in the last 12 months, legit 700 conversations with a CRO, CMO, head of enablement, head of sales engineering, right? And I asked about your product-led strategies and how your customer, your buyer behavior has changed. And this is a real thing. This is across the board in SaaS. So you asked about when is product-led the wrong strategy? And it reminds me of the account-based craze, right? When is account-based the wrong strategy? And I always laughed at the folks that would say account-based is the marketing team realizing what the sales team has learned or known all along. And account-based is not a switch that you flip. Account-based is a series, almost an infinite number of small tweaks and changes to the way you run your overall go-to-market. Well, product-led is the same thing. Asking when is product-led wrong for a business is like, when is freemium wrong for a business? But product-led and freemium are not the same thing. And so every business needs to adopt some type of product-led strategy in some areas of their motion, but there's a right and a wrong way to do it. I'll give you an example. Legacy SaaS companies that take 3 config calls, 2 user trainings, and 6 weeks to realize value should not put a free trial on their website. That's not what your buyer actually wants. They should put a clickable interactive sandbox on the website because the time to value is greater than the amount of time I want to spend educating myself. So that is a bad example of a product-led strategy, is dumping somebody into a sloppy, long time to value trial when they just want to shop and see what you do, right? So you could do product-led strategies without going full freemium. And it's less about should we be product-led? You have to be product-led. You have to be product-led in 2021. It's about how can I, with my existing tech stack and my existing, limitations, how can I offer up some product up front that doesn't turn into homework for my customers?
That's so profound. Yeah, I usually prepare questions for this because I would ask you, how do you get the marketing to synchronize? And do you have an enterprise strategy that's different than a mid-market strategy? There's just so many kind of factors in this. I'm curious how you're thinking about that. I have a ton of questions now. You just opened up Pandora's box. You want to take those two also? What are some companies that you look toward? I've talked to some entrepreneurs in here. They're just like heads down doing their own thing. And I think that's really cool. But are there other companies like, Snowflake or Slack that inspired you? I know you're in the sales tech area. So yeah, if you could rattle some of those off, that'd be amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. You can go on HubSpot and Salesforce.com right now. You can go to those websites and get free trials of their product, right? And they're legacy gorillas and B2B SaaS. They never did trials. We don't have to do a trial. We're Salesforce.com. We have 180,000 customers. You've used me in 2 of your previous jobs. Why would you need a trial? That was the mantra from Salesforce for years and years and years. Go on their website right now. You can have a free license. Go on HubSpot's website. You can have a free license. Look at the fastest growing companies in the world. Like you said, Snowflake and Slack. They're product-led. Twilio, product-led. These are all companies that for one reason or another have realized that the consumer wants to install your app, click on it, and then decide if it's worth keeping or decide if they need to talk to a human being. And so this is going to permeate the entire B2B SaaS landscape because the leaders have already done it. And there are some legacy enterprise, sales thought leaders out in the world fighting against it. And it's like old man yells at cloud. That wouldn't work in my space. My product is too complicated, or my product. Nobody wants to buy an enterprise software product off the internet. And it's like, cool, man, but they are. They are buying these enterprise products off the internet, and all of the VC money is going into more product-led companies. So either you're going to be product-led one day, or your competition is, and your buyers are going to go and get upstreamed by your competition. They're going to take these freemium point solutions and start working on paid expansions while you're still saying like, oh, this meeting's a discovery call. The demo is actually next week, and you're running out that tired, enterprise sales motion that we've been doing for 20 years. So product-led is here, and every company has to find a way to show a little bit up front and let their customers engage with the tech before you make them engage with the human being, period.
Could you see sales teams running like with no sales team if this approach were nailed?
I think that there are a lot of companies that are already doing that, and what they do is instead of hiring a sales team, they put a free offer out there, and that's how they do their initial product market fit. And then they kind of grow from there, and it starts to catch heat and get viral. And all of a sudden you've got a business, in the tens of millions in annual revenue. And what happens more often is they hire an enterprise sales team to go chase big deals, right? But their DNA has been product led from the jump. And so I think the alternative to that is an enterprise company launches and they sell directly to the enterprise, and they become known as like the market leader for enterprise in that category. And then they want to stand up a touchless SMB motion. Like we want that SMB revenue, but we don't want to go build a team to go do it. Right. And so I think you see companies kind of going at this from both sides, starting in the SMB touchless and then build an enterprise outbound team, or start in the enterprise outbound team and then build an SMB touchless. And so either way, I think you're going to see a lot of companies get to a world where they kind of have a hybrid approach where you can take the trial, you can use the product, you can get the tutorial, like you can try it before you buy it, but you can also deal with a skilled and highly trained, sales team. And I think we're going to see that become more common than anything else. And then I think eventually we'll find new ways for humans to support clients. And our SDRs and AEs will settle into those new support roles, right? And I think that'll happen over time. But I think the immediate change you'll start to see is most B2B SaaS companies will have some hybrid approach. You can take it without help, but if you need help, we're here for you.
It's awesome. Yeah, I was thinking like if a lot of people, so there's like the product qualified lead, the new PQL, and then there's enough of that, and then there's, 5 people, 7 people, 20 people. When's the threshold? How do you determine that? And then how do you know it's an enterprise deal or mid-market deal? One of my big things is I look at SaaS and it's like SDR AE, I call it industrial complex because, SaaS happened 20 years ago. I guess my friend Rajiv, he told me that Cisco and Salesforce both reached a $50 million ARR in 2002, I think it was. So we're about 20 years in and we have these molds and models that are fixed and all the software is built around it. So you can't break down sales, marketing, and ops and just refact. What I love about Product-Led Growth is redrawing the lines of the traditional SaaS company and what roles and divisions of labor and things. So where I'm going with that is how are you intending to scale? You could give your own example, but how, talk to me about the organizational design and how you're going to align the sales process to the bigger accounts. You might have touched on some of this, but I really do think about SaaS transformation from an organizational level.
I agree. I think that we have some really dated sales motions that are being trotted out there. And I'll give you a funny example. I've always hated conflict on a first call with a prospect. I hate it. It's a weird game of poker where they just want me to pitch and I just want them to admit what project they're working on. I want the pain and they want the solution. And we're kind of, in this weird game of chicken of who's going to blink first, and all the legacy thought leadership is discovery before demo. How will you tailor your pitch? How will you know what points to hit on? And if you give the demo up front, what causes them to stick around and give you discovery? They already got what they wanted. They'll leave you in the lurch. But the reality is that doesn't make any sense. Discovery, demo, trial, deal as a linear motion. That doesn't make any sense because it takes 5 to 7 people to buy a piece of software. And you have an average of 1.25 prospects on a first call. Okay. And so you meet that person, you do discovery, and then the next week you're supposed to do demo. Well, they bring 2 stakeholders with them. So you don't do discovery with the 2 new stakeholders, right? And then in week 3, another person shows up and you're not supposed to learn what they care about. You're not supposed to demonstrate, right? So it's not a linear sales motion anymore. It's a series of give and take meetings where you do a little bit of show and tell, you learn a little more. You tie that to the next meeting, you do a little bit of show and tell, you learn a little bit more. And it ends up being a fluid motion, a series of give and take calls versus a very linear sales motion, which is what, we're used to people advising. And so I think that the dynamic of how companies are buying software has changed. And I think we're still used to seeing a flow chart or a bifold, buyer wants, seller wants. Right. And I think this game of horse trading is over. And so I think every SaaS company now has to take a really genuine look at the way their buyers are going through the new buyer motion, and they have to adapt their sales motion to be relevant again. Because I think you're sending your sales reps out there to slaughter, having them show up to a first meeting when the prospect is already halfway through a free trial of your competitor, and you're telling your rep to be like, no, this demo's this call's discovery only. The demo is next week. It's insincere. It's fraudulent. And they know what you're doing. Like, you wouldn't understand my product until you give me discovery is one of the more condescending things a sales rep can say to a prospect. Or it's our process to do discovery on this call and demo on the second call. I don't give a shit about your process, right? My wife and I sold 2 houses during COVID, right? And we bought 2 houses. And we're not rich. We don't have it like that. That's all the money we have, right? We sold 2 homes, we bought 2 homes, and we did it without talking to a human being. We were in-app chat for the mortgage, and we were texting the realtor the listings we wanted to go see. She texts back lockbox codes, right? So we went and bought 2 houses, sold 2 houses without talking to a human being. I get to Reprise, and I'm on the phone with the vendor that has a $7,000 product. And that vendor says, you wouldn't understand my demo. It's very complicated. You have to give me discovery. And I was like, listen, man, you're a year and a half out of college. Like, F off, you know? Like, I just need the solution. I don't need your song and a dance. And he's like, well, it's our process that we do discovery on the first call. And I hung up on him, and I went and found a competitor that put me in a free example right on the website. And I started using it. I sent it to my co-founder. This is what we need. And we bought it, right? Without talking to a human being. This is how humans are buying now, and we have to adapt.
Fantastic points that are made here. Very, very interesting. Yeah. So product-led growth. Do you feel like you have a competitive advantage by embracing this before other companies do it? Yeah.
I'll tell you what, from my conversations, it absolutely feels like an arms race. As we get close on a deal, like we're working on a deal with a prospect, they start to ask questions like, are you meeting with my competitors? Do you know if they're doing something like this? And it's absolutely this funny, like, arms race of like, who's going to get the product out there sooner? Because the realization has started to set in. You know, if I go on your website, I'm here for 90 seconds and I'm looking for 1, what does the tech do? And do I think it helps me? And 2, what's the fastest way I can get into it? If I get on a call with a vendor right on the first call, I'm like, can I try it? What's your evaluation process? And so your buyer is clearly trying to race into your product. And if your competitor has an earlier doorway where I can get into their product, and you're delaying me 2 or 3 interactions down the road, I'm eventually just going to unsubscribe from you, and you're going to miss out on these opportunities. And so I do think that there's a bit of an arms race. Which vendor in that space can get product led sooner? You know, because you know the game. Go on 5 websites, MQL on 3, take 2 calls, trial one of them, and make a purchase. Well, that narrowing of the funnel happens earlier and earlier now. And so if you're the vendor that's not offering a product experience early on, you're the vendor that's getting cut out of these competitive evaluations. So it's totally an arms race to get product led faster.
Very fascinating. So for people who want to learn about this, I know OpenView kind of coined the term. There's some really good books out there. What are some of the blogs, Slack channels, communities? Like, just if you could like lower the veil and share with everyone how they can learn. This stuff is esoteric and hard to find, but I suppose it's out there. And where do you go? Who do you trust? Who are the thought leaders? Like, it's emerging.
So I'm Boston based. So I love my friends at OpenView. They are the product led VC. They're the best at it. They do a ton of thought leadership. They have a lot of companies in their portfolio that are product led, and they're the experts. I think Wes Bush at the Product-Led Institute is great. You can go to productledinstitute.com, read about Wes Bush. He's got a book. I think Chris Mills from HubSpot is really, really smart and good about this. You go read his content. I think that it's out there, you know. It's just a matter of like waking up to it and shifting our mentality from what has felt very much like a product-led is the future, says, you know, the product community and the VC community, but sales is king, says the sales community. And it's starting to really turn into like 2 camps here. And I'm just advocating that salespeople be a little bit hip and a little bit smarter than that, and don't cling to the way the world used to work because it's good for you or because you're afraid you don't have a home in the new world. Instead, embrace what is very clearly a trend in your industry and start to find ways that you can adopt this and enable it and be a part of it instead of an opponent to it, because it's happening whether you like it or not. Like, that's where the VC money is going, businesses that are building product-led SaaS companies. And so you better find a way to be relevant still and stop just like hiding your head in the sand and hope that this doesn't come. It's already here.
Makes a lot of sense. So product-led growth, how does ABSD play in? We've got this really strong, savage inbound because they're using the product. Okay. They don't need the seller. These are intuitive products that have product market fit. So if you're good at using Slack and someone nails the product market fit, Pendo, right? You go use it. It's intuitive. You can use it. You don't really need a discovery. You don't really need someone to find your pains and peel it, right? You're using the thing. It's a useful thing. It makes sense to use it. Where's the role then of outbound? You're going out and targeting, but you've already got these companies in. It becomes confusing. I need, and the crew over at Snowflake seem to be doing this really well. How do you see it fitting with the Reprise? Just in general, how do you use outbound then effectively and thoughtfully to not upbraid the buyers, like you said, and not force, your hand on them?
Yeah, I think it's a trend that the XDR role is already very, very hip to. It's about providing value. It's not about a cold pitch anymore. It's not about asking for a meeting. It's about giving them something that's actually useful to them in their job. So I think Outreach does a really good job of this. They offer up assessments and health checks as a first touch instead of asking for a meeting with sales. And when you think of the trend of going away from here's what we do when you take a meeting and going towards here's a free tool or a free website or a free meeting, can you use it? Just take that one step further and just be very, very direct and specific with your prospect based on your role, vertical, whatever. Here's how I think we could help you. And here's an example you could try now. So here's one of our free apps. Here's a free trial, or here's an example of how a customer is solving a problem currently. And it's just about getting closer to the real world value for your target and offering it up front instead of offering a consultation that might lead to a demonstration, that might lead to a trial, that then would show them how they would benefit from your product. Just put it in the first email.
Joe, you've been awesome. I've learned so much so fast. Check out Joe Caprio, Caprio. It's Reprise. Thank you for coming on the Product-Led Growth for SDR show. We'll get more acronyms for you next time, I promise. I got to get back to Boston. I do miss it.
TTLY, GTG.
Thanks for everything, Joe. Thanks for being on.
Thanks, Justin. I'll see you, man. I got a jet. Thanks for having me.